Hello everyone. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, and let's go.
Hi friends. Please subscribe and help me reach my first 1,000 subscribers. Thank you. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's go. Marriage is a strange and contradictory thing. You walk into it fueled by dreams, absolutely certain you've found your forever. In the beginning, everything feels perfect. The honeymoon phase paints your world in technicolor, and even the most mundane chores turn into little adventures because you're redoing them together. That's how my story with Laura started. 7 years ago, when we tied the knot, I was sure I'd hit the jackpot. She was smart, sharp-witted, and had this effortless charm that made her the center of attention in any room. But over time, something shifted. Or maybe she just changed. Looking back now, I realize the red flags were there all along. They weren't screaming for attention. They were subtle, tiny shifts that were easy to miss unless you were looking for them. A late night at the office here, a cancelled dinner date there. She'd brush it off as workplace stress or just needing some me time. I believed her, because isn't that what trust is? You take the person you love at their word when they give you an explanation. What I didn't know was that trust could be turned into a weapon. Last New Year's Eve was supposed to be our typical quiet night in. Usually, we'd stay home in our place in Orange County, watch the ball drop on the big screen, and toast with some decent champagne at midnight. But this time, Laura had other plans. She told me she was heading to a house party hosted by a guy from her office. Supposedly, it was a networking thing. But there was a certain glint in her eyes when she talked about it that made my stomach do a slow roll. I didn't want to play the part of the jealous, insecure husband, so I played it cool. Sure, go have a blast, I told her. I'll just stay here and catch the bowl games, I added with a forced smile, even though my gut was screaming. She headed out around 8 p.m. She was wearing this shimmering dress that hugged every curve, the kind of outfit I hadn't seen her pull out for me in years. Laura looked incredible, but the realization hit me hard. She wasn't dressing up for me anymore. Don't wait up for me, she said, tossing a playful smile over her shoulder before she walked out the door. Those words stung way worse than I wanted to admit. I tried to distract myself. I had the college football playoffs on in the background, but I couldn't tell you a single play. My mind was a million miles away. Who was she with? Was she actually at a party? In the distance, I heard the muffled pops of fireworks signaling the start of the new year. Happy New Year, I thought bitterly, sitting all alone in our empty living room. It was almost 4 a.m. when I finally heard the front door unlock. Laura stumbled in, swaying slightly, the sharp scent of tequila and expensive perfume trailing behind her. She was dangling her high heels from one hand, looking like they were a burden after such a long night. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to be deep into something on my iPhone, though every muscle in my body was coiled tight. My heart was thumping against my ribs, and I was doing everything in my power to look unfazed. She walked right past me like I was part of the furniture and headed toward the kitchen for a glass of water. Her movements were clumsy but carried a strange, defiant confidence. When she turned back toward the hallway, the dim overhead light caught it, a dark reddish mark on the side of her neck. There was no mistaking what that was. It was too prominent, too loud. My stomach dropped, and it felt like someone had sucked all the oxygen out of the room. I froze, trying to process if I was actually seeing what I thought I was seeing. A desperate flicker of hope crossed my mind. Maybe I was wrong? Maybe it was just the shadows? But the longer I stared, the clearer it became. That mark wasn't from me. Rough night. My voice came out unexpectedly loud, cutting through the silence like a jagged blade. Laura jumped, spinning around to face me. Her eyes went wide, like a deer caught in the high beams. Her pathetic attempt to look casual crumbled instantly. "You still up?" she stammered, her voice shaking even though she was trying to play it off. She took a step toward me, but I put my hand up, stopping her in her tracks. "What's that on your neck?" I asked. My voice was flat, almost robotic, even though I felt like I was burning up from the inside out. Her hand instinctively flew to her throat, shielding the mark. She wouldn't look me in the eye, her gaze was darting everywhere but at me. "Oh, this." She let out a nervous little laugh that only made my skin crawl. One of the girls at the party got way too trashed and started getting all touchy-feely. You know how those things get. The lie was so lazy, so insulting, that I felt a surge of pure adrenaline-fueled rage. I wanted to scream the truth out of her, to force a confession, but then something inside me just broke. I realized right then that her words didn't mean anything to me anymore. Without saying another word, I got up from the couch and brushed past her toward the bedroom. The smell of her, that mix of booze and some guy's cologne, hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Lying in bed that night, the reality set in. This wasn't a marriage. This was a charade, a farce, and I was done playing my part. By the time the sun started peeking over the horizon, I had a plan. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the images from that night. Her unsteady walk, the blatant lies that mark on her skin, it all played on a loop in my head like a horror movie, leaving a scar as real as any physical wound. The next day, Laura acted like nothing had happened. She was chirping about her New Year's resolutions and humming along to the radio while she made breakfast, playing the role of the doting wife to perfection. I played along. I smiled when I had to and nodded at all the right times. On the outside, I was a lake, calm and still. But underneath, a cold, hard resolve was taking shape. This marriage, the one I'd poured 7 years of my life into, was DOA. All that was left was to handle the funeral arrangements correctly. I knew I couldn't just storm out in a fit of pique. I needed to be surgical. I needed to plan it so she'd be left drowning in the chaos she'd created. Monday morning, as soon as Laura left for her office, I went to work. I grabbed a legal pad and started a checklist. Documents, accounts, clothes, a new place. Everything had to be airtight. I knew our financials inside and out. Most of the big assets, like our house and the cars, were either in my name or held jointly. That gave me the upper hand. I was going to make sure that by the time I walked out that door, anything she thought she had access to would be gone. It was my first step toward getting my life back. First on the list, I opened a new bank account at a different branch, registered solely in my name. I moved the bulk of our liquid savings over, leaving just enough in the joint account so Laura wouldn't see any red flags on her banking app immediately. Next, I called the credit card companies and flagged our joint cards for suspicious activity, effectively freezing them. The thought of her card getting declined next time she tried to buy a $100 lunch brought a grim smirk to my face. Then came the paperwork. Birth certificate, passport, social security card. I packed them all into a briefcase and tucked it away where she'd never find it. I didn't want to leave a single shred of my identity behind for her to mess with. To handle the rest of my gear, I went across town and rented a self-storage unit, paying for 6 months up front in cash. Over the next few days, while Laura was at work or out grabbing drinks with her friends, I spent my time moving my essentials out. I purposely threw in some junk, old boxes, a broken lamp, some old college mementos, just to make it look like I was just decluttering if she happened to walk into the garage. By the time I was finished, half of my life was locked away in a 10 by 10 unit, waiting for the moment I decided to reclaim it. Laura didn't have a clue. She was too wrapped up in her own world, texting her friends, staying late at the office, or mindlessly scrolling through Instagram. But I saw everything. I saw how she dodged my eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. I watched the way her phone would light up late at night and how long she'd spend checking her reflection in the mirror before heading out. I knew exactly what was going on, even if she didn't have the guts to own up to it. One evening, while Laura was in the shower, I spotted her iPhone sitting on the marble countertop. She'd been careless enough to leave it unlocked, and I seized the moment. My pulse quickened as I began scrolling through her messages. There I found exactly what I had been dreading, a flirty, ongoing thread with a colleague named Matt. It was packed with suggestive emojis, inside jokes, and a level of intimacy that made my stomach lurch. That mark on her neck hadn't been an accident. It was the smoking gun, proof that she had been lying straight to my face. Now, I had the confirmation of her betrayal. But just walking away wasn't going to cut it. I didn't want her to just skate by without facing the music. That was the moment a real plan started coming together in my head. The first step was building a digital paper trail. I took screenshots of her entire history with Matt and fired them off to my personal email. Then I did a deep dive into her socials, looking for the cracks in her double life. I found photos that had been suspiciously cropped and location tags that completely contradicted where she told me she'd been. I saved every single receipt, dates, timestamps, even the threads where she talked down about me, calling me a clueless drag who was holding her back. I drafted a massive email addressed to her closest friends, her parents, and the mutual acquaintances who always acted like she could do no wrong. I laid out the whole timeline of her deception, backed by the screenshots. I wasn't going to hit send just yet, but knowing the gun was loaded gave me a dark sense of satisfaction. Next, I found a short-term rental on the other side of town. It was a modest one-bedroom apartment, nothing fancy, but perfect for a clean break. I put down the security deposit in cash, signed the lease, and tucked the keys away in my glove box. The final move was the exit itself. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want to hear her desperate excuses or her trying to guilt-trip me into staying. It had to be a ghost move. On a crisp Saturday morning, I loaded the last of my things into the trunk of my Ford. The house was dead quiet. Laura was still upstairs, dead to the world, with no clue that her reality was about to hit a brick wall. On the kitchen island, I left a short, blunt note. Laura, I know exactly what you've been doing.
Dont beauté câline.
We redone. I walked out and didn't look back at the life we'd spent 7 years building. As I pulled out of the driveway, a wave of emotions hit me, a jagged mix of anger, bitterness, and sudden relief. But mostly, I felt light. I felt free. This wasn't the end of my story, it was just the prologue. Leaving the house that had been my home for so long felt surreal, almost like a dream. It wasn't just about moving out of a physical space, I was abandoning the entire identity we'd constructed together. The morning sun was hitting the streets of our neighborhood, and everything looked so peaceful, the manicured lawns, the leftover holiday wreaths on the doors, the quiet cul-de-sacs. But it was just a stage set, a suburban facade hiding the wreckage of my private life. I kept my eyes on the road. I couldn't afford a single backward glance. One look at the front door and I might have started second-guessing myself, and doubt was a luxury I couldn't afford. The wheels were already in motion. My first stop was the self-storage facility. I dropped off the last of my gear, 2 suitcases, a duffel bag, and a small box of personal items from my life before I met Laura. These were the anchors to who I used to be and who I was going to become again. Locking that unit and sliding the key into my pocket felt like the ultimate severance. Then, I headed to the new apartment. It was a basic place on the outskirts of town with beige walls, older carpet, and that faint smell of fresh eggshell paint. It wasn't the Ritz, but it was mine. It was a fortress of my own making, a sign that I was finally taking the wheel again. I dropped my bags in the middle of the empty living room and just stood there, taking it in. This was day 1. By mid-afternoon, I was ready to cut the remaining cords. I powered down my old phone and swapped in a new SIM card with a different number. I kept the old one active just long enough for Laura to realize I was gone, but I had no intention of ever reading her texts. I logged out of all our shared accounts, Netflix, Amazon Prime, the grocery delivery apps, and changed every single password. I systematically erased her access to my digital life, and each click felt like a small victory. The final blow was the banking. I logged into our joint checking account and moved the remaining balance to my private account, leaving just enough for her to cover the utility bills for the month. It was enough to keep her from panicking for maybe 24 hours, but not enough to let her stay comfortable. I disabled her online access to the statement history. When she finally checked the balance, she'd be looking at a big fat 0. That night, I sat on a mattress on the floor of my new place. For the first time since ID left, I let myself think about her. Not the cheater, not the liar, but the woman ID actually loved. The Laura ID fallen for was a ghost, replaced by a stranger who came home drunk with a hickey on her neck. I played out scenarios in my head, confronting her, demanding an explanation, screaming until my lungs gave out. But I knew it wouldn't change the math. Whatever her reasons were, boredom, ego, a midlife crisis, they didn't matter anymore. All that mattered was that I was the one in control now. The next morning, I checked my email on my laptop. It was a wall of automated notifications, subscription cancellations, and bank alerts. Nestled among them was an email from Laura's mother. The subject line was blank, and the message was short. I heard what happened. Call me when you ready to talk. We worried about you. I read it once and hit delete. Laura's parents had always been good to me, but I needed to distance myself from that entire orbit. I couldn't heal while I was still tethered to her family. By the end of the day, I started imagining her waking up in that big, silent house. Shed probably started the day with a massive hangover and a foggy memory of the night before. But then, she would have found the note on the kitchen island. I pictured her reading it over and over, thinking it was a prank, maybe even laughing it off at first. But as the hours ticked by, the reality would have started sinking in. Shed walk through the house and see the gaps. My side of the walk-in closet? Empty. The master bath? My toothbrush and cologne gone. My spot in the garage? Vacant. Shed tried calling over and over, only to hit a deadline. The silence would be the only answer Shed get. That thought gave me a cold, dark sense of peace. She was finally feeling the void Shed created, and for the first time, she was truly on her own. To celebrate, I treated myself to a small luxury, a double bacon cheeseburger and a cold Stella from a dive bar down the street. It was a tiny thing, but it felt like a win. Sitting by the window of my new apartment, watching the traffic go by, I felt a stillness I hadn't known in years. Laura's betrayal had left a mark, sure, but it had also forced me to see the truth. With every sip of beer, I felt the old pushover version of myself dying off. I wasn't going to be anyone's doormat ever again. I was the one who was going to rebuild, no matter what it took. My plan wasn't even close to being finished, and I knew tomorrow would bring a new set of challenges. But for tonight, I was just happy to be breathing. The fallout from her choices didn't stop at her social circle. It hit her professional life like a freight train. I heard from a former colleague of hers that the affair with Matt had become the primary topic of water cooler gossip. HR had been tipped off about the inappropriate relationship, and both of them were put under a microscope. Matt's wife, fueled by the evidence ID passed along, had gone scorched earth. She didn't just handle things at home, she contacted Laura's employer directly and laid out the entire sordid timeline. Laura was staring down the barrel of losing everything she had ever worked for. One evening, a text popped up from Megan, Laura's former best friend. She wants to talk to you. Would you be willing to meet her? I stared at the screen for a long time. I was torn between the peace of silence and the need to see her one last time, not to reconcile, but to make it clear that the man she once knew was gone. She had destroyed that version of me just as surely as Shed destroyed our vows. 2 days later, I agreed to meet her at a small nondescript coffee shop on the outskirts of the city. I arrived early, snagging a corner table where I could keep an eye on the entrance. The shop was quiet, with only a few patrons hunched over laptops. The smell of roasted beans filled the air, but it did nothing to soothe the knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. When Laura walked in, she was unrecognizable. Her hair was pulled back in a messy, careless bun, her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, and a bone-deep exhaustion seemed to weigh down every step. Her eyes scanned the room frantically until they landed on me. I saw a flicker of relief cross her face, followed immediately by sheer desperation. She approached the table and took the seat opposite me, her fingers nervously picking at the hem of her sleeve. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't say a word. I just watched her. "I know I hurt you," she began, her voice trembling. "But I need you to understand." "Stop," I cut her off. I didn't bother hiding the edge in my tone. "I don't want your excuses. You cheated. You lied. You torched everything we built." She tried to choke back tears, but her voice gave out. "It was a mistake," she breathed. "A mistake is a choice you regret after you get caught," I replied coldly. "Now you just dealing with the consequences." Laura buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with quiet, jagged sobs. When she finally looked up, her eyes were pleading. "Is there any chance? Even a tiny one, that we could fix this?" I shook my head, feeling the absolute weight of my decision. "No, Laura. There's no road back. You made your choice, and I made mine." Her face contorted with pain, but she just nodded slowly, as if she had expected the answer all along. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I hope you are," I said, standing up to leave. "Because sorry is all you have left now." I walked out of that coffee shop feeling like I had finally closed the book. Laura was going to have to navigate the wreckage on her own. I was moving forward, finally unburdened by the weight of her betrayal. Stepping out into the sunlight, I realized that for years, my entire world had orbited around Laura, her needs, her dreams, and the image of the perfect couple I thought we were. Now I was free to rebuild myself as an individual, not just half of a pair. The path ahead was wide open, and for the first time, I was the one deciding where it led. In the weeks that followed, I went all in on my new place. My main goal was to curate a space that reflected only me. It was a blank slate, a chance to create a home free from the compromises that define a marriage. I spent my weekends hitting up flea markets and furniture stores, picking out pieces that I actually liked. The process was therapeutic. It gave me back a sense of agency and helped me reclaim my identity, one lamp and rug at a time. I also reached out to friends I'd drifted away from during the marriage. Most of them stepped up in a big way. Some even admitted they'd seen the cracks in Laura's facade long ago but didn't know how to tell me. It hurt to hear, but it was a solid reminder of how important it was to reconnect with people who had my back before I ever became Laura's husband. Work became my sanctuary. I buried myself in new projects, pulling long hours and tackling challenges I'd previously ignored. It wasn't just a distraction, it was a way to prove to myself that I was still sharp, still capable, and still valuable. The hard work paid off. I landed a promotion and earned a new level of respect from my peers. It felt damn good to take pride in my own success again, a feeling that had been missing for a long time. One night, while unpacking a stray box, I found a photo from our honeymoon. We were standing on a beach, grinning at the camera, completely oblivious to the train wreck waiting for us 7 years down the line. I stared at it for a long time, wondering where exactly it all went wrong. Was it something I did? Or did she just change into someone I couldn't recognize? Eventually, I put the photo aside. Analyzing the past was a dead end. The only thing that mattered was the future. Meanwhile, Laura continued to deal with the fallout. Friends would occasionally drop updates, even though I never asked. I heard she'd been fired after the internal investigation wrapped up. The last I heard, she'd moved back in with her parents and was trying to piece her life back together. When the news first hit, I felt a quick surge of "I told you so," but over time, that anger faded into total indifference. Laura wasn't my problem anymore. Carrying that grudge was just keeping me tethered to a ghost. About 3 months after ID moved out, a letter arrived. It was handwritten, the ink smeared in places as if she'd been crying while writing it. In the letter, she apologized for everything, not just the affair, but the years of gaslighting and neglect that had led us there. She said she didn't expect forgiveness, but she hoped I'd find happiness. I didn't write back. Her apology seemed sincere, but it didn't change the math. I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer as a reminder of what I'd survived. Time moved on. Months turned into a year, and my life found a new healthy rhythm. I started dating again, though I was cautious. Trust didn't come easy after what I'd been through, but I refused to let Laura's choices dictate my future. Then I met a woman named Emma. She'd gone through her own share of rough seas, and our shared history created an immediate bond. Emma was the polar opposite of Laura. She didn't need to be the loudest person in the room. She didn't crave constant validation. Her strength was in her warmth and her brutal honesty, the very things I hadn't realized I was starving for. With her, there were no games, no hidden agendas. Just a real, deep connection. For the first time in a decade, I felt hopeful. One evening, while we were lounging on the sofa laughing at some terrible Netflix movie, Emma looked at me and said, "You look lighter lately. Like you finally dropped a heavy pack you've been carrying." Her words hit home. She was right. I'd finally let go of the anger, the betrayal, and the version of myself that was defined by Laura's mistakes. "I think you rewrite," I said, pulling her closer. I think I finally did. Sitting there with her, I realized the past had lost its grip on me. Laura's betrayal had once defined my entire existence, but now it was just a chapter in a much longer book. That chapter was closed for good, and the new one, the one full of actual promise, was just beginning. And that's where today's story ends. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and comment. We'd love to discuss this story with you. See you in the next video.